And out in the Pacific, we now have Tropical Depression 1E, a couple hundred miles off the Mexican coast, the first tropical depression of the year. This will become Tropical Storm Alvin soon as it gets more organized and more intense. We'll get you updated on what could very soon be the first named storm of the year. And the Atlantic season looms. It'll be here on Sunday. We're reflecting on lessons learned from years past and looking ahead to what we can expect in the new season. We're taking you to Cedar Key, Florida, where they're rebuilding after being slammed by 3 hurricanes in just 13 months. That's all right now on Fox Weather Now. There it is, Tropical Depression 1E. We had said it 1 because it's the very first of the season in either basin, Pacific or Atlantic. The E stands for Eastern Pacific, so it's the designator that the National Hurricane Center uses, so we know where this thing is. 5 p.m. advisory, first one of these issued this year by the National Hurricane Center. Winds are at 35 miles per hour, so basically the National Hurricane Center has told us the structure is there. By definition, they're comfortable calling this a tropical system, a tropical depression. Any stronger, now that the structure is there, this will be considered a tropical storm once that gets bumped up to 40 miles per hour. If you've been with us, we were talking about this general envelope and how it had consolidated some. It appeared as though this had gotten better organized over the past 6 to 12 hours. And right in through there, I'm wondering if that's what did it. There's this new, even now, some new thunderstorms erupting, and they're banding something like that. There are some curved bands. That's probably where they're calling that low-level center, and it's probably, seeing that on satellite, one of the reasons that they went ahead and bumped this up to a tropical depression, or at least acknowledged that the structure was there. And in the short term, it's got a pretty good setup for this to become a stronger system, staying at tropical storm intensity, but becoming a pretty well-formed tropical storm by the time we get to Friday morning. That's only 36 hours from now, and the forecast, keep in mind, it's the very first forecast from the National Hurricane Center. It's a brand new system, and those forecasts are typically more prone to error. It's up to 65 miles per hour, so that's a well-formed tropical storm in Alvin at that point. From there, thankfully, Alvin's got big problems moving farther off to the north, and you can see with the low-level spin, it weakening and becoming more ragged on approach to the southern tip of the Baja. That has a whole lot to do with the fact that it quite literally runs out of gas. Right about this latitude here, you get south of it, that darker red indicates sea surface temperatures in the upper 80s and low 90s, or to about 90. That's super supportive for the intensification of a tropical system. North of that, you get into those greens, the 70s. That's not even enough for the system to maintain its intensity. So this is decaying as it moves farther off to the north. Not to mention there's some dry air in the mix and a bunch of wind shear that'll be forcing in that dry air and basically tearing the top right off this system and making it lopsided at the very best. I think this thing gets effectively completely shredded, but some of that moisture around that upper level low, you can see it here, likely pivots, gets pulled in up toward the desert southwest, and that could enhance the coverage of some rain and thunderstorms out that way. So there will be a lot to watch.
You know, we live in a beautiful state. We got beautiful beaches, but guess what? We have hurricanes every so often. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. You can always rebuild your house. You can't rebuild your life. So the most important thing is get prepared. I want everybody to do it. I'm traveling the state. I was in Southwest Florida yesterday, today in Miami and Tampa, tomorrow in Orlando and Pensacola, just working to get the state ready.
That's Florida Senator Rick Scott describing the deal you make when you live down in the hurricane zone, such a beautiful part of the country, but dealing with the potential for hurricanes is part of life. And now we've got this 2025 Atlantic season drawing closer, and folks that live in the hurricane zone have to prepare as they always do. The Sunshine State, though, hit especially hard last year. 3 landfalling hurricanes, a couple of majors. Jane, we've got Fox Weather's Jane Menard back with us today. Pacific jumped Atlantic because of the new developments, but we're only a few days out from the start of the Atlantic season. It's wild to say that.
I know it's hard to wrap your head around that June is next week, but here we go, and you need to be prepared. I mean, we have these conversations now just so that you can best equip yourself with the tools and the knowledge that you need going into the season ahead of us. Now, June typically can be a messy month for any tropical disturbances. There's been some chatter that the start of hurricane season may start off a bit active. No guarantee that we'll see that pattern come to fruition, but let's take a peek into what we're watching right now, at least now and then in the next couple of weeks. Tropical waves, we've got a pair out there right now, one emerging into the Caribbean as we speak, one just off the coast of South America. Now, there is plenty of moisture here, but you can see some drier air across the Caribbean, down across the ITCZ, where you have that lift and that abundant thunderstorm action into the northwestern Gulf, where we have that dying front and some showers and storms that have picked up along it. But we've got a lot of wind shear too, and those hostile upper level winds, a very present feature to the beginning of the season. It's a limiting factor to getting any of those tropical waves, any kind of oomph to become something a little more. That tropical growth is certainly hindered. Dust is another factor, especially early on in the season. We've got a big plume of it working across the main development region. That's going to lift up into the Caribbean and in fact into the Gulf as we go through the early part of next week. And so really, that's going to squander anything from coming together in the mid-levels. We'll make for some pretty sunrises and sunsets there if you live on the Gulf Coast. But this is the period that we're watching. Now, yes, we've got a big old plume of dust gearing up to move off the main development region, but there's a little bit of a lull here as we go into the later half of next week. Now, what happens in that lull? Well, we could see some increased moisture, shower and thunderstorm development in the first 2 weeks of the Atlantic hurricane season, being the first 2 weeks of June. This is likely to favor the Eastern Pacific, where dust is less abundant as it kind of shifts up through the Caribbean and into the Gulf. We have development likely not only in the first week but into the second week of the month of June. But also too, that's when things get a little more interesting. We bring the Bay of Campeche, a sliver of the Caribbean, into the mix with that increased rain chance up through the Bahamas. We could at the very least see the opportunity for some tropical moisture to lift up into the Gulf. That would increase the rainy season across spots like the Sunshine State. But where we have that development likely, or I should say possible, through the areas of mid-June, that's typically when we'd see it. These dying fronts that move off the coast, they hang out in the Gulf and suddenly get a little spin of energy and a really messy system.
Yeah, it doesn't always take a whole lot, but Jane, we talked about how if it was weak, some folks would be glad to see one.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cristobal in 2020 was a perfect example. No flooding concerns, but it shaved away at some of the drought, and so people there were actually rejoicing.
Yeah, as long as you can dodge severe weather with all the spin in those things, the rain can be very beneficial right at the very end of the dry season. Jane, we're looking ahead to the new season, but we're still looking back toward last year, still ahead. Trees ripped down by Hurricane Helene last year are now making it harder for crews to fight wildfires. We're live on the ground in Tennessee, where crews are hard at work when Fox Weather Now comes right back.